The following production is part of the Play Some Video Games podcast network.
And welcome to Board with Video Games, the gaming podcast that strives for the right balance of coverage for games you play on your table and on your television. You can think of us as the Savage Garden of gaming podcasts. We're a proud member of the PSVG Podcast Network and now a member of the Make Us Better team over on Patreon. I am one of your hosts, Kyle, and joining me on this co-op adventure, the guy who's as sweet as Chica Cherry Cola. Josh, how you doing this evening?
What is the opposite of vibrant, full of life, and energetic?
I'm going to guess that's you.
Yeah, that's me.
You seem pretty vibrant tonight.
Yeah, I'm all right. When I get home from work, I literally could have just went to bed. I was sitting down on the couch thinking about going to pick up my son, and I was like, I could just sleep for the rest of the day. But I don't have that option, so I did not do that.
But instead of sleeping, you chose to record a podcast. So I'm sure this is going to be one of our best episodes ever.
Well, I think I hit I plateaued a little while ago, so I'm pretty much the same.
Yeah, that is the one bummer though about recording our podcast when we do is I always get like a huge second wind afterwards. Yeah, so then I'm up far later than I intend to be or should be. But hey, are you a fan of the band Savage Garden?
I was a fan. I wouldn't say I am a fan.
Gotcha. They were pretty big in the 90s, you know?
Yeah, I mean, no, actually I should say I wasn't not a fan of them, but I wasn't I don't think I owned any of their albums.
Gotcha. Yeah, they were a duo. That's the only reason I chose to go with them. They were definitely not on the top of my 90s group favorites, but there's no real duo. It could have gotten Milli Vanilli and blamed it on the rain, but instead we are going to stick with that Savage Garden. But hey, you know what? This isn't a music podcast, though I'd love to do one of those. This is a gaming podcast, so thanks so much for joining us this week. As always, if you have any feedback, questions, suggested topics, hit us up at Board with VG on Twitter or over on Instagram. You know, that way you can check out all the awesome games that Josh is playing, that I am playing, and all the wonderful pictures that we put up there. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/boardwithvg. Also, you can communicate with us more long form, boardwithvg@gmail.com, and use that hashtag boardwithvg on all the social medias. We think it's awesome. And that way we can keep up with all the wonderful things you are playing. And hey, if you're interested helping make us better, check out Patreon at patreon.com/makeusbetter. Pitch us a few dollars over there if you're willing. We really appreciate all of you who have. It definitely is helping keep the mics on. Also, big, huge thanks to all of you who have downloaded our episode from last week. We really enjoyed having Colin on the podcast, and we definitely have seen a return of investment, if you want to look at it that way. We've definitely seen a lot of popularity of that podcast and that show. So if you're here for a second week only, thanks for coming. But hey, enough of this housekeeping. Josh, what have you been playing on your tabletop?
Well, what have I been playing? You know, we had a pretty slow week. We didn't get any games together played, despite we had plenty of games coming in to play together. We just didn't get any game time together. But I did manage to get a couple games of Role Player in solo, and that's ROLL. For people who don't know the game specifically, you might be looking up a different type of game. It's designed by Keith Matajeka. I'm going to guess that's how you pronounce it, and it's probably totally wrong. And it's from Thunderworks Games. It's essentially, it's not what I thought it was, per se. It's kind of like creating a character in an RPG before you play the RPG, if that makes sense. So it's dice building, similar to Sagrada. People have compared it to Fantasy Sagrada, even though I don't know if I necessarily see that. It comes with a bunch of character sheets. You have different races, human, dwarf, not always races, as classes as well. cleric, I think is one of them. Elf is in there. I don't know. It's races, and then your jobs are the skill tree, like cleric, warrior, all that kind of stuff. So what you do is you can, what I did was I blindly chose a character. I just picked whatever side came up. I didn't care if it was male or female. And on your board, you're going to have essentially like a large player mat, even though it's cardboard, with punched out holes that will fit dice. And this game is largely dice. There's, I think, 72 dice. And I'm just pulling that number out of my butt, so who knows. You also will take cubes. There's different color cubes. They suggest you just pick a cube at random, and that will determine your class. So purple is a certain class, black is a certain class, depending on what you have. And I took some pictures and posted them on Instagram. I'm going to pull it up now on my phone so I can explain a little bit better what those were. But essentially, after you do this, oh wow, we post a lot. After you do this, you're going to get you get a class like rogue. So my first game I had an elven rogue savant. So when you look at the board, if you look at the pictures I have, you have next to your class, you have all the things you typically see in building a character: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. On a character sheet, you'll see specific points, and then you'll see stars. Those stars indicate, we'll call them victory points, the best way to describe it. And you have to hit or get in between the numbers shown. So as an example on the rogue, for strength, the number needs to be between 16 and 17 by the end of the game, and you get 2 victory points from it. And what that means is when you look at your character board, each attribute, sorry, I have a fly flying around me. Each attribute has 3 holes, and you will eventually, essentially draft dice into those holes and fill them. So for strength, you would need to get dice equaling between 16 and 17 points. As you play through the game, certain things will let you change dice or alter dice or swap dice. So you can always be manipulating your character, which is a good thing. You also have a special ability, like on the rogue, it's mischievous, and it's when using a skill card, you don't have to move your alignment marker. So if you're familiar with role-playing in general, you should know alignments are like good, evil, chaotic good, chaotic evil, all that kind of stuff. So when you play the game, you have like lawful, good, chaotic, and evil. And you also will get minus or plus points depending on your character and where they land. So this elf was a scoundrel, so you're going to get more points for landing in the chaotic or evil than you would, and you would get minus points for landing in the good category. I'm going to get that fly. So as you're playing through, you also have, I said savant earlier, and you have this like character trait, and on it, it also shows your character levels, but it highlights specific colors very much like Sagrada, where you have to match like a red die in a specific spot for the red cube or whatever's on the picture. You'll also get victory points based on how many of these die alignments you match based on the picture on the card. So all that being said, you go through the game, you're going through, we'll call them dungeons, like a dungeon deck, and you're getting weapons and armor, but you're not actually using them. You get victory points for collecting armor sets. So if you collect like 3 chain armors, you're going to get however many points, whether it's 3 points, 4 points, whatever it is. And while you're doing that, you're constantly having to balance where your die are and where they need to be. So you don't want to just focus on matching the color of your die to your tracker, because you might end up losing points in the long run because you're trying to chase 6 victory points. You might end up losing 12 or worse. I thought after the first game that I did very well, and when I looked at the scoring, I was middle range. I thought I crushed the game. So there, in the second game, I did about the same. So it's not something that it's nice because it makes you feel like you accomplished something. But it's also good because you're challenging yourself. It's not a game that you just go in, master, and then you're done with it. So I really like that aspect of it as well. I definitely want to get the expansion because it just adds more to the game, and it's not. I don't think it changes any mechanics. So you're really just adding monsters to the game. So, well, I guess it will change one mechanic. You have monsters, but you get new characters, new traits, and you're also getting skills while you play through the game, which are nice in traits. So, like, traits will give you extra victory points for getting certain things while you play. My second character was a neurotic dwarf, so I thought that was pretty funny as well. So you can choose to play all random if you want, or you can kind of tailor it to how you want to play. You can, if you really want to have full control over your character, you can pretty much do that in a single player game. I think more people would have umbrage with you if you tried to do that with multiple players. But that's role player, and I really enjoyed it playing by myself. I don't play many games at all solo,
So how many people, how heavy is this game? It sounds pretty midweight. Like, how challenging is this game to learn? Is this a good game for entry level players? What would you think about that? So
it's rated, it's a 2.36 weight on BGG. I say that's a little high. I think it's a little lower than that. I read the instructions, and then I watched one video on a solo playthrough, and I kind of played through with it. Just because I did have a few questions after reading it, but ultimately I think it was pretty easy to get a handle on. But it has a lot of elements of other games, even like deck builder elements. So because I'm familiar with them and familiar with like how Sagrada works, I think I found it a little bit easier. It's definitely not a gateway game. So I wouldn't say, like, if you're just looking to get into games, that this is what you want to do. But for anyone looking for something new and different, and I wouldn't say too challenging, but challenging enough that will make you want to keep playing it to kind of master it, I think it was very good. It's at a 7.6, so that's pretty decent. It's overall ranking of 258 on BGG, so that's pretty high.
That is pretty high. It meets my movie viewing requirements. So
you could totally do other things while playing this game.
Okay,
for sure. So you could sit down and watch a TV show or a movie or whatever, because you also can go at your own pace.
Gotcha. No, I probably should clarify. My movie viewing requirement is if a movie is a 7.0 or higher on IMDb, I will probably watch it. That is my movie viewing requirement.
Well, you could also watch a movie while playing it.
Perfect. Good to know. Serendipitous.
Well. There's a few things I left out, but I don't think anything that's going to change anyone's mind on the game. And I've done my fair share of rambling on board games recently, so I think I can cut this one short.
Awesome. All right. So that is Role Player. So go ahead, check that out if it sounds interesting to you. The game I played this week, I put a poll up, I should say, up on Twitter to get feedback from folks about what game you'd want to hear about. And then there was a tie. So then I decided that since there was a tie, I would just get to pick between those two. So the tie was between Wasteland Express Delivery Service and the Quest for Eldorado. I chose to go with the Quest for Eldorado purely because I felt I could learn it a little quicker, and I didn't have a ton of time in order to get my gaming in this weekend. So I went with Quest for Eldorado. It is designed by Rainer Knizia, printed, or published, I should say, by Ravensburger. And this is a deck building game. And I think the thing that is most interesting about Quest for Eldorado is you hear deck building, and I think for most people, deck building immediately brings a certain connotation to mind. You are going to be building your deck. You are going to be buying additional cards to make a better deck. And probably at the end of the game, you are going to win by whoever has the most points based off of how you've constructed your deck and the items that you've collected. Maybe you've defeated some villains that have earned you points or something like that. But there's probably been some sort of point collection going on while you're building your deck. This game, that doesn't happen at all. The Quest for Eldorado is a deck-building race game, and how you win is by being the first person to finish the course. That is what happens. So on your turn, it starts like any other deck builder is going to. You actually, first I should say, you set up it is a map that has multiple different pieces to it, and it comes with a whole bunch of them, and then it has a suggested first map setup. So you go ahead, put the pieces out, how it suggests, in order to kind of get a feel for how the game mechanics are going to work. After that, there are suggested other configurations you can use on another sheet that range from easy to very challenging. And then they give you some general guidelines that if you want to construct your own, here are some things to keep in mind, or here are some things to consider. So the replayability for this game is significant because you have all these different pieces that you're going to put together in different configurations to really kind of create the map of your dreams if you would to try to get across. But that's kind of part number one. Part number two then is you go ahead and you start building your deck. Everyone starts with the same 8 cards. And what these cards do is once you pull them into your hand, you start with 4 cards in your hand and you play them, and they are either going to be green to like go through the forest, they're going to be blue to go over the lakes, or they might be gold if you're going to go across deserts, or the gold is also how you purchase other cards. So when you play a green, if there's 1 green machete on it, you get to move 1 green machete space. The pieces on the board, or the hexes on the board, are going to have different numbers of machetes in them, or different number of ores in them, and that's how you know how many power, if you want to look at it that way, or how many movement you need to get through those squares or those hexes. The interesting thing about this game, though, is you cannot combine cards. So if there's a hex with 3 green machetes on it, you have to have a 3 or higher machete card to play in order to go through it. You can't combine a 2 and a 1. So that is one interesting thing about how this game works, because typically in deck builders, you can just combine all of your stuff together, or you are adding things together in order to make that happen. So you can't do that, which is number one. Number two is that when you are moving, you have to play basically 1 card at a time as a result of that. So you play a card, play it out as far as you can, and then you can play another card and play that one out as far as you can, since you can't really combine things. Also, you can only ever purchase 1 item per turn. Now, you have cards that are out to be purchased. There are 6 cards available in the market. There are 3 of each card that is available in the market. Once all 3 of those are gone, there is a additional 12 other cards that have 3 of them. That these cards give you extra power. They either give you additional machetes, they give you additional purchasing power, they might give you additional ores, they might give you special powers to draw extra cards and things like that. But you can only ever buy cards from the market. So once a group of 3 cards is gone, whoever buys cards next, if they can choose any of the 12 other available cards that are there, but then once that first card from that group of 12 is chosen, that set of cards then becomes the next card in the market. So you can kind of dictate which direction the purchasing is going to go by if a spot comes open in the market saying, okay, this is the direction I want to go, so I'm going to force everyone else to go this way, no matter how much they've been planning about how they want to go. But that's the entire game, basically, is on your turn, you draw your 4 cards, play out your cards for movement, decide if you're going to purchase something or not, discard the cards you've used, draw back up to 4 cards. Another thing that is interesting is you do not have to play all of your cards if you don't want to. You can hold 1 in your hand and just draw 3 more to get back up to 4, which is kind of unusual a little bit for deck builder as well. But that's the whole game. It's really simple to teach. It's very quick to learn. Once you have people who know what they're doing playing it, it goes extremely quickly. The first game that my wife and I played probably took about 40 minutes. The game says it's 30 to 60 minutes. Our first game probably took about 40, 45 minutes. After that, we played 2 more in an hour. Because once you learn what you're doing, especially with 2 people, it's really, really quick to go through. The only kind of wrinkle for 2 players really is that instead of getting your 1 character through the map to the end, you have to get 2 characters through the map to the end to win. So that's kind of the only change really with 2 people, but it still goes extremely quickly. But because of all of the different ways that the boards can be set up, there are additional things that they add. There are mountain pieces that when you initially play, you just can't cross. But once you have played enough, they have you add cave pieces to the board in those spots that give you extra powers or extra abilities. There's actually a lot of replayability to this. It's kind of a little bit different every time you play it. It reminds me a little bit of Kingdom Builder in that sense that it's very quick to learn. People are going to be able to understand it. Even if they haven't played a ton of designer board games before, they're going to be able to get in, understand what's going on. But there's a lot of different replayability to it. There's a lot of variable setup to it. So even if you've played it a lot, it always is going to feel a little bit different. There's never going to be one clear strategy to win. And I think that's really interesting and exciting about it. It was nominated for the Spiel des Jahres last year. It did not win, but it was one of the 3 games nominated. And I can see why. I think it's a pretty, like I said, easy to teach game that most people are going to be able to get into. And I had a lot of fun with it. It's definitely a different deck builder. I really enjoy deck building. The one thing I will say about it that I don't like, and this is true for basically every game that does this, it has the little itsy bitsy cards. I hate small cards. I can't stand them. They don't feel good to hold in my hand. I just don't like them. I know they do it to save money, but I hate small cards. Especially if it's a deck builder where I'm going to be holding these and shuffling these all the time. I want regular standard playing card size cards. But that's really my only complaint about it. Otherwise, the production value is really good. The art is cool. It's nice to look at. Everything is very clean, and it's easy to understand what is what. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I definitely recommend it. If you're interested in jumping into a easier game to teach, or looking for something that you can play with, I think with kids even pretty young, probably 8 to 10, probably could grasp this pretty well. And it's pretty inexpensive. I think it's regularly under $30. So a pretty easy pickup as well. So that's Quest for Dorado. Definitely recommend it. Josh, what have you been playing on your television?
Well, up until today, I didn't really have. I was going to cheat. Anyway, I'm still going to cheat, but I was going to cheat. But right up until we started playing, I got into No Man's Sky update. So that's what I was playing. I was trying to find a save point to come in here to record. And wow, it is. Even my wife was sitting next to me. She said, "This isn't the same game," and she's absolutely right. They have literally changed everything about the game. Maybe not in the way people are thinking. Like, when I say everything, I don't mean they change like the minerals, but they changed how you interact with the minerals. They change what you see when you see minerals. They changed everything about the game. It has changed in some aspects. Now, I should preface that by saying I barely touched the last 2 updates. In fact, I only jumped in on the last one just to see what it looked like. So from what I'm saying, a lot has changed considerably between when I played last and today's update. So I don't know the difference between today's update and the previous one. Right away, when you start the game, it pops right up and asks you, do you want to play a game with friends now? And you can choose yes. Or it says, do you want to create a game and let friends jump in? You can invite friends in later. So you have that right away. And then after you get through that, you have, I want to say, 4 or 5 different game modes to choose from now. So now you have regular play, survival, permadeath, and create mode. So I did the regular mode, but the create mode, you literally don't pay for any resources. You can just build bases wherever you want. You don't ever need to search for a piece to build your ship. You can go explore. You can do anything you want. You just don't get trophies on the PlayStation. So I'm sure achievements on Xbox. And then once you jump in, I get put into an ice planet essentially and died. My first play.
Welcome back.
Yeah, I know. I was like, they're like, you gotta find this. I'm like, well, where is it? Oh, it's 700 kilometers away and I'm already dying. Great. It doesn't hold your hand as much as the first game, the first time it came out. So you have to do a little bit more legwork and figuring out where you have to go. Eventually it does give you like hints on where you should be going. But I can't, the guy who makes fun of people who play old games has just been playing old games recently. So, I mean, I guess I just have to own that. So I can't wait to play more. I'll talk more about it next week because if I have time to play games, I will most certainly be playing that. And I did cheat. I had 2 app games. I got Isle of Skye. I didn't play it enough to talk about it too much, but it's essentially a different, it's like Carcassonne, but has more options. But it looks really nice, and there's a funny tutorial. So that was fun. And then today I was going through our Facebook page, and when I do that, I always go through the Dice Tower page that I joined, and people were playing Quest for Eldorado all last week on that page. It was very bizarre because I knew you were potentially playing it, and then I saw like 15 people play the game and take pictures. It was really weird. But Gons Shown Clever, I saw, is out on app form now in English. So it's a popular German game. I'm literally going to leave this podcast and kill this fly. It is distracting me from any quality work. So it's a very popular game. At least it was in Germany. Now people are kind of starting to see it come over here. Are you familiar with this game, Kyle?
I have heard of it. I don't know much about it, though.
Okay, so I'm going to show Kyle a picture on the screen. I don't know if you saw that, but this is what a typical board looks like in the game.
That's not daunting at all.
It's very so it comes with rules. I figured the first time I would play it, I would just kind of play it and figure it out. So I tried to figure it out. It didn't work right away. So I read through the rules, and it is a die rolling game. And you have 6 different colored die. And on your board, you have 5 different colored die board markers, we'll say. There's a white die that is a wild. You can use it for anything. So you roll your 6 dice, and there's a fox. There's a scoring marker. I still don't know why, but it's there. So on your board, you have like a yellow board, a blue, green, orange, and purple. The green, orange, and purple are like scoring tracks where they go left to right. And the higher you go on the green, the more you get. The further you go in the orange and purple, you get bonuses to die rolls or turns. The yellow box is a grid where you're trying to connect either like a picture like a bingo board. And the blue box is another grid where you're trying to connect lines left to right or top to bottom. And you'll get point values based on that. Inside the blue and yellow boxes are point values of dice. So like in the blue, there's a 10, 11, and 12. So you need to combine dice together to equal that. And in the blue, if you use a white or a blue, it will add the value of the white or the blue, the opposite that you're using, with the other die. So if you have a 1 that's white and a 5 that's blue, you'll have 6 points. So when you do your die roll, you should be doing 3 die rolls. And the way it works is you roll your die, you line them up numerically, lowest to highest, and then you draw 1 die. However, if you draw the highest, so if you draw a 3, you only re-roll the dice that are higher than the 3. So if you draw a 6 and that was the highest die and that's your first die, you basically waste a whole turn, a whole round. There's 6 rounds, and in each round a different bonus happens. So there's things that happen, like if you fill a line in yellow, it will give you a blue X, so you can fill in any spot in the blue color that you want. You can also get, like, the second line in yellow is you get 4 points in the orange marker. So it's essentially a die roll of 4. And there's a bunch of other things like +1 extra die draw. You also get bonus, like, what's the word I want to use? Re-roll your die. There's like markers for that. You can stack those and use them whenever you want. And that's kind of the game. It was very overwhelming when I looked at it, but I saw so many people playing it online. People were like Kevin Austin, he said the guy that he works with printed out a copy in the German copy and had it made and brought it to work to play. Like,
that is impressive. That's dedication.
I'll tell you, I played it all day today.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All day. And when I say all day, I mean my battery life was down to 10% on my phone all day. And that's while working.
I was like, weren't you supposed to be working today?
I played it while working, in between like all these terrible physical tasks we're doing. So like if I had a minute, that's what I was doing. It's crazy addictive. I'm really enjoying it. And I'm trying to figure out how to best do this. Like, I've played games where I've only tried to fill certain rows, or games that I've only tried to fill certain amounts of the rows. Like, it's a very Yahtzee-esque type of game, but taking Yahtzee up to like a 3.5 rating for complexity, maybe higher. I don't even know if it's on. I bet it is on. Sorry for the clicks, everyone who's listening. But it's pretty awesome, and I don't remember how much the app was. It might have been $3. The weight is wicked low, 1.98. But it's rated 7.6. It's 129th in all of family games. It's great. I can't wait. I will get the physical version when it comes out in English, but I know that right now it's only in German. So yeah, once that comes out, I'm very excited to get it, to say the least. So check it out. If you use the App Store or Android, I believe it's on both. It's well worth your time. I already think I got my money's worth out of it just from today. So yeah.
That is awesome. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
So, a long time ago, I promised you that I would go back and I would finish Far Cry 5. And I will say, I have not quite finished it, but I am on the cusp. I have all 3 regions cleared. So I am right there. And I was actually going to try to power through it before the podcast tonight, but I was like, I don't think I'm going to have enough time. But I have the 3 main regions clear. I've done all of that good stuff, and so I'm right on the cusp of finishing up this game. And I think I don't understand why everyone likes it so much. And here, let me explain really briefly what I mean. And now maybe the story payoff is going to be exceptional. That could still happen. So I'm not writing this off yet, and hence the reason I still want to finish it, and I still will before next week.
It's not going to save the game for you. I just hate to tell you that.
No, I don't believe that it's going to, but I'm still going to finish it. I think the thing that I struggle with is, to me, there's a big difference between having a serious story that has a little bit of laughter and humor in it to cut the tension and to cut the seriousness of what is going on. There is another thing, or there's another situation of having to try to have a serious story in a setting that is absolutely ridiculous. And that's what I think my struggle with Far Cry 5 is that everything else I do that is not a main story quest is ridiculous, and in the best ways. Like, I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but it is so jarring then to go back to this quest, this main storyline that is trying to be so serious. And then when I'm done, I'm talking to Herc, who's talking about blowing things up and trying to join the cult because he wanted to get to sleep with a lot of pretty ladies and all this other stuff. And just, it's so, my mind just can't handle it, I think, is more than what it is. So I'm still playing it. I think, like I said before, the gameplay is still great. I am enjoying the world. I definitely disagree now that I've gone back into this and played it more. I definitely disagree with Donnie's take on the fact that this is the best looking world out there in games right now, because the amount of pop-in that I still have does not allow it to be the best looking game world that is out there. But it is fun, and I understand why people play it, and I actually probably will jump into the DLC. When I went back to this, I didn't think I was going to get hooked back in, and I thought it was going to be a chore for me to finish it. But it's been fun. I've had fun going back in and playing it. I've had fun going in and running around and doing things. I enjoy having Cheeseburger go and maul people and sending, I don't use any of the human.
No, me neither. I just use all the animals.
Yeah, I just use all the animals because the humans are horrible compared to the animals. And I have just stopped caring about trying to be stealthy. I just go in and blow everything up. And it's great. I'm having fun. So yeah, I think I was able to put my finger on what my issue was with it, is that it just seems so dichotomous between the two. And like I said, I think that could be okay in the right situation, but I think in the world of Far Cry 5, it's just too different. It seems like you're living in two different worlds a lot of the time. And I think that's my biggest concern with it, or my biggest issue that I have while playing it. And this definitely for me this week has been a cleanup time. I looked at the video game release schedule, and there's a couple small games I might get in August, like definitely looking at picking up Dead Cells and definitely looking at getting Overcooked 2. But I was like, I have some time probably until Spider-Man that I just have some time to get some stuff cleaned up. So I've been trying to go back and finish up games. Still, I'm going to play Resident Evil 4. I just didn't go back to it because I also jumped back into Detroit because I really want to get that game cleaned up too. And I kept playing it. And I still like it, and I still think a lot of my initial impressions of that game are still holding true. That I think the individual interactions between characters is excellent. I think the overarching story, I think, is maybe a little ham-fisted. But I know that some folks over in the Make Us Better Discord have been talking about it and love it. Kevin Austin, I believe, just finished it recently, and he adores it, it seems. So again, maybe a game that I'm just a little bit on the fringe about. I when I look back at my top 5 games of this year, I think a lot of the games that a lot of other people from PSVG would put in the top 5 are not going to be in my top 5. But that is okay. That's why they make so many different games, and I understand why people like them. And I'm not saying I hope they don't. I'm thrilled that they're having fun with them. Just a couple things that are tripping me up a little bit more than I would like them to. But again, Detroit, I'm still going to finish it. It's still engaging to me. The story, I think, overall is still interesting. I think graphically the game looks amazing. Like, it's doing a lot of good things. The music is spectacular. So it's doing a lot of good things. Just nothing that's going to probably even put that one on my top 5 games of the year at this point. But hey, that's okay. Still having fun playing some games. But yeah, it's just been backlog time for me, and probably will be for the next probably close to a month. So if you don't want to hear about old games I'm revisiting, I apologize. I will try to fit in some new ones in there, some smaller new ones in there. Maybe I will probably play Life is Strange Before the Storm so that Donnie gets off my back about it. So that's what I've been playing on my television, sir.
Nice.
What do you say we transition into some, topics of the show?
It's a great time to do that, I think.
I think so too.
Okay. All right. So this kind of hit the news cycle today, at least for me. I know some people will probably be familiar with a little bit of this. But according to a recent interview with the Hasbro CEO, which Hasbro, man, has been having a great year. Dungeons and Dragons is having its best year ever as well. Full stop. But why? What has caused this resurgence in D&D's popularity? Well, that's what we're going to talk to you guys about. Because we had a CNBC news article and a Polygon article. So let's get into the CNBC one first. And I'm going to say, from reading it, a few things stuck out to me. Excuse me. One, they talk about them branding over with Magic. Mm-hmm. This is way further down, but about competitive gaming. I had no idea there was something called Arena that's either out or coming out, which is like the next evolution of Magic digital games. Did you know about this?
Yeah, so it is definitely, I don't know how familiar you are with MTGO or Magic the Gathering Online. Magic Online has never been very robust. Many, many years ago when I played a lot of Magic, the client was straight up just bad. It was ugly. It was dated. It didn't look good at all. They did a more recent update to it that didn't really fix a lot of the issues that it had, because when they did the recent update to it, Hearthstone was becoming big, and it looked nowhere near as good as Hearthstone did. It was still looked dated, still looked clunky and complicated in how you had to order all of your priorities and everything. It was very complicated. And I think that's one thing that Magic has going against it, is it's a super complicated game compared to Hearthstone in all the steps. I'm not saying that the strategy is more complex or anything like that. Just there's a lot of steps to Magic. So this new one, Arena, looks much more in the Hearthstone vein. It kind of is like the Magic version of Hearthstone, but playing Magic with it.
Cool. All right. Well, let's get back to Dungeons and Dragons, and we'll go circle back to Magic. All right. So I want to ask you about a question I have for you. So for the people listening, this interview was with Brian Goldner, who's the chairman and CEO of Hasbro. He was on Mad Money, Jim Cramer's show, and he said, this is what I want to ask you about, a quote, "People are more into Dungeons and Dragons today than ever before," end quote. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's an accurate statement?
I mean, I don't think he's lying. So I don't know what the metric is or how they measure that.
Right.
But, I believe that they probably are seeing more growth than they have ever. So maybe that's kind of what he's talking about, is that more people are into it because the number of new users are growing faster than they ever have before. And I think they talked a little bit in that about they've had double-digit new user growth, so more than 10%. growth in their new users over the last couple of years, which really, when you think about it, is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. I think it's just interesting. Maybe the context, people have been playing Dungeons and Dragons forever. It's just we're in a time where what everyone is doing is more accessible to everybody else. So I don't necessarily know. I mean, he's not giving numbers, so he's just saying today than ever before. But when I read that, I thought it was like, oh, how do you know? Like, I don't even have a lot of D&D people stepping forward from the 80s saying, we were all playing. Like, it was a closeted kind of thing, to be like totally honest about that.
Yeah. Well, but I think they can look at the number of books that they're selling and the number of like items that they actually are selling related to the game.
Yeah.
It seemed like in that CNBC story, they kind of just posited on their own. And I don't know if this is true or if something was said in the interview, but it seems like they kind of posited that Stranger Things, the show on Netflix, had something to do with Dungeons and Dragons growth. Like I said, I didn't see anything in the interview about that, but just said that CNBC like randomly was like, hey, maybe it was because of this.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. It's really funny.
Do you think that could have anything to do with it?
No, because you saw them playing Dungeons and Dragons for all of 5 minutes in the very first episode of the first season. And it's like subtly referenced to the Demogorgon, but only by name. You never really see them play Dungeons and Dragons. You kind of get a glimpse of like them talking to each other about it. But if anyone's going to grasp onto nostalgia from Stranger Things, I don't think it's going to be Dungeons and Dragons they grasp onto. It's going to be riding bikes and going to arcades and wearing vintage shirts again. Like, that's what you're going to get from Stranger Things. Like, but who knows, just as easily as we can say it doesn't, CNBC can say, hey, Stranger Things is a thing that had Dungeons and Dragons in it. I don't think that they, it's not in so much mainstream media that they can really like reference anything else to that end, So they talk about the surge, and so they also said they think it's people are re-engaging because it's face-to-face. It's a face-to-face game. I mean, that follows right into what we're in the middle of, and that's the board game like renaissance, if you will. But I don't know that necessarily like Dungeons and Dragons is scary for board game players. To not all, but like it's a big jump as far as complexity. And if we talk about weight of games, like, I mean, it can really depend on whose game you're playing.
Right. But also think about it in comparison to a board game of how much stuff do you need to play Dungeons and Dragons? Not a lot.
You don't need much.
Right. So I think it's easier if you have one person who is pretty passionate about it, or maybe played it when they're younger and wants to get their now current group of friends together. They can step up as, the dungeon master or the DM and guide that group, and everyone else, maybe they get a few dice and call it good. Like, you don't need a ton to play Dungeons and Dragons, where if you want to have a regular board game night, that's expensive. Like, it's really expensive to play as many board games as you and I play. Yeah. Like, that's a lot of money. Like, I could play Dungeons and Dragons for way less than I play my board games for. And honestly, it's interesting because when I think of the friends that I have more friends right now who have D&D nights than I do who have board game nights.
Really?
And friends that I never, ever would have imagined would have been in that realm, that who I never thought would have been into that. Like, one of the people, it's actually two of the people that I play Overwatch with regularly, they both have D&D nights that they go to all the time. And they never played D&D when I met them, but now they do.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting that is something that has really grown over time, but trying to get them to a board game night, I feel like would be far more challenging.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, that's great to hear. I guess I don't see that here, but regionally.
Right. No, for sure. How much do you think that their Twitch presence has mattered? Because they talk a little bit about the online gaming, and that between Magic and D&D on Twitch, they have over 1 million viewers a month who are watching either professional Magic tournaments or regular Magic tournaments and D&D, online D&D sessions. Do you think that is a growing area? Do you think that's going to continue to grow? You look at, there are obviously a few very high profile D&D style campaigns that exist out there that people watch regularly, but do you think that's something that's going to continue to grow?
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially online, like people watching it. It's essentially like free storytelling for people interested. So like you look at Acquisitions Incorporated from PAX. They've been doing that for a decade. And it's one of the few panels that you can't get into unless you wait in line forever early, right? So you have that. You have Harmon Quests, which is Dan Harmon's D&D group that they run with everyone. Celebrities come on. They did a TV show of it, but they also do it before every episode of his pod. Well, they try to do it in every episode of his podcast. And the people go nuts over it. Do you guys want to play D&D? They go, yeah. They're a little bit more jokey. It's not so like serious like some games can be.
Yeah, we'll see if Dan Harmon's things continue here moving forward.
He's fine. Dan Harmon has not been targeted again. Anyways, we could talk about that later. You have Titan's Grave, which is on YouTube, which was Will Wheaton's show, and the biggest of them all, I think, right now is Critical Role,
right? Which
the numbers they're pulling for a Geek and Sundry show are like network TV numbers. It's insane.
They really are. The following that show has, or that I guess you'd call it show. I don't know what to call it, program. It's ridiculous how many people watch that, and how many people, again, who I would never expect to watch it.
Yeah, and it's easy. Like I watched the whole Titan's Grave thing, and I never considered myself like a D&D guy, but I still enjoyed watching people create characters. So it's like watching actors play board games, kind of. Like, it's not physical, but I think Twitch is bringing a whole new audience to everything. So why not D&D?
No, absolutely.
I think that's great for them. And the biggest, well, I don't know if it's the biggest news. I think it is. D&D and Magic the Gathering are crossing over in the fall. And I had no idea this was coming. It sounds like some people did, but do you think this is something that can cross over? Do you think that these groups of players like each other, can mix together? Because they're two very passionate gaming groups Critical Role, speaking of them, they just started getting their first like batch of toxic fan base, and they've been speaking out against those people, not in a negative way, but promoting being nice and positive and don't be like that. So do you think with the way that even like intense like board gamers can get, do you think it's something that can mix?
I mean, I think so. I think there is definitely an overlap between the people who play Magic and the people who play D&D. How extensive that overlap is, I guess I don't know. I do think it's interesting, especially with them going back to Ravnica is going to be the plane they're revisiting in Magic, and that's where they're doing this first formal crossover called Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. So they have done some small, official but not really published, but you could download items in the past that have been source books for D&D for different Magic planes. But seeing them do this for the first time in a big way, I think is really interesting, that they're actually creating a hardcover source book and going down this, I don't want to say rabbit hole, but starting to explore this relationship a little more in depth. I think it could work. I definitely think it could work. There's a lot of Magic players out there. I think they've definitely tried with some of the Magic board games to try to see what the overlap has been there. I think the one interesting thing to always see will be how much does Wizards of the Coast support this, and how much do they nurture this moving forward? Because that's kind of been the problem with the board games, the Magic board games, is that there hasn't been a ton of support, it doesn't seem necessarily, to keep those products relevant and new and up to date, and to encourage people to play them. But I think the fact that you very clearly are going to be able to create characters and planeswalkers and things like that from, Magic, and that they're going to fit in, like, what does it mean to be a green, since if you a green mage, for lack of a better word, in the world of Magic, how is that going to translate into the world of D&D, and how does using the nature and the forests and all those things to your advantage, how does that work, and how does that feel, and making that kind of a good transition? I think Ravnica is the perfect plane to do it, because it's very much based on guilds and jobs and things like that. So I think that's going to be a good place for them to go with it, and a good opportunity for them to do that. So I think it's going to be pretty successful. I could be totally wrong, but I think the Magic fan base, like you said, is very passionate. I think D&D fans are very passionate. And I think it might be a time for them to, if nothing else, check it out and see if it's something that they're interested in. And I'm kind of surprised it's taken this long for an official crossover, but I definitely am going to be interested to see how this crossover works. What do you think?
I think it's cool. I think that it's nice that they did it. I think it seems like a natural fit thematically.
Mm-hmm.
I just think back to my Magic days, and we were like toxic gamers before they were a thing. So like I always get worried about stuff like that, but maybe I should stop thinking glasses half full. I should be glasses half full, not so worried about how these things will mix. I think it's a great opportunity, especially if these things are both at peak. I don't know if Magic's peak, but if D&D is peak, great. Let's do it. Let's get some new life into something that has never changed. Like Magic has always consistently been card game, and it still will be, but it's more story for D&D, really. It's called Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. It's going to be $50 hardcover source book. There'll be other books, I'm sure, that go with it, and it comes out on November 20th. And it's going to include classes, races, monsters, setting information, and 10 opposing guilds. And we'll see where it goes from there. But I just look at like Starfinder and the madness it created when it came out. Was it last Gen Con?
Yeah, I think so.
People were waiting in line and they sold out right away, and they thought they had enough to get them through like the week or the weekend. And I'm excited for them. Like I think we talked about this previously. Everything doesn't have to be for me. Like I think it's awesome that people are getting content that is new and exciting to them.
Absolutely.
So I'm all aboard.
Hey, speaking of new and exciting,
yeah,
it's almost time for Gen Con. I'm not going to Gen Con, and you're not going to Gen Con, but Gen Con is one of the biggest board game conventions of the year, and it's really the largest in North America. It happens August 2nd through the 5th in Indianapolis, and this is really the first time, if you're not familiar with it, that a lot of the new hotness for board games are either going to be released or you're going to get your hands on a demo for them. So Gen Con is kind of the place that happens. A lot of the big publishers try to release games there. And if they can't release them, they at least try to give hands-on demos for the games that are going to come back in time or come out in time for the holiday season. So over on Board Game Geek, they have a huge geek list of all of the games that are going to be at Gen Con for people to either purchase or play for the first time, or a lot of other, and sometimes it's just games that have been out for a year or two that are still pretty hot and that people are still really interested in. I think when last I checked, there were 539 titles on the list. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot. That's a lot of games. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a few minutes and talk about some of the games that we are most excited about that are going to be at Gen Con. Now, the important thing to note, some of these games might be being released. Some of these games might only be in demo form. It's kind of going to be all over the place. So this is, if we were going to the conference, these are the games we want to go check out while we were there. Maybe buy if they're available to, but if not, at least get a demo of. So in order to give you a moment to think, the first game I am going to throw out there is a game called Villainous, which is coming from the folks over at Wonderforge. It is a hand management game that is set in the world of Disney movies, but you take on the role of a Disney villain. So I'm really interested in this game for a couple of reasons. Number one, I like the theme. I'm a big fan of Disney. My wife's a big fan of Disney. The game looks really good. Just how everything is put together, the art in it, the miniatures that are in it, everything looks really nice. Number two, I like the opportunity to play as the bad guy sometimes. You don't get that very often in games. So the fact that they are taking this route with it is super interesting to me. So it's definitely a game that I think from a theme standpoint appeals to me significantly. The other thing I think that's actually interesting about it is what seems to be the level of production for this game for the price. The game looks really well put together. The graphic design is wonderful. And obviously, they're using, it's an officially licensed Disney thing. So it obviously is going to look great, but it's also only $35, I think. Yeah, which is a great price. Which is a great price for what you're getting in this. So yeah, and it's always hard with these things because is the game good? I don't totally know. I really don't know necessarily if this game is going to be good, but it is definitely a game that I'm interested in seeing. It is a game that I would love to be able to sit around and watch people play. There are some early previews available of it out there that you can definitely go ahead and check out to see if this is something that you would be interested in. This is one of those games that is, I don't necessarily know if it's going to be good or not. It's the Prospero Hall development group that has worked on it. So you don't really necessarily know who the designer is. They're the same group of people that did like Bob Ross Art of the Chill and things like that. So it's one of those odd, this is a collective of people who work together to produce the best game they can, and no one person gets credit for it. So
Right.
It'll be very interested to see exactly how this game turns out, but it is definitely something I would want to check out if I was at Gen Con. So that is Villainous. Josh, what is a game you would be very interested in?
Well, that was the game I was going to talk about.
Oh,
first.
no, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I didn't see it on your list. So
Yeah, I added it at the very
safe.
end. I apologize.
No worries. I'm very excited about it. It's definitely a theme that we can get around. Not only just my wife and I, but that's something I can introduce to the family, which I think is great. You can watch a full playthrough on Game the Game with Becca Scott if you want to get an idea of how the game plays. They did a full gameplay. She also teaches the game as well at the beginning. That's on YouTube for anyone who wants to watch. So I'll just stick with the theme. One of the games I put, it might be a surprise for me, for me to pick. It's another game that I would consider a family game. It's Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, a gemstone mining game. And I picked this for the theme specifically because it's a retheming of a game I've always wanted to get, which is Quartz, which has been a game I've heard is good and I've never picked up. So it's USAopoly, and essentially in the game, you and the fellow dwarves do your best to mine for gemstones. You collect as many as you can. You trade them into Snow White for pie points, but your friends are competing against you in the mine to try to send you back, like Clank style, home without any gems. So you play over 5 days, and the person with the most mining gems wins. It's 3 to 7 players, so it's a really solid player count. Obviously, 7 players for 7 dwarves. So the 3 players can be a challenge sometimes if it's just 2 of us, but this would be a game I would get to bring to family gatherings, Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving, stuff like that, where it might not get as much play as all the other games, but hopefully it's good enough to continue bringing around. And with the Disney theme, it hits that spot for a lot of people. So I'm excited to at least check it out and see what we're looking at.
Very cool. So another game that I'm very interested in it is a game that is being released by a really well-known designer. That designer is Matt Leacock. And if you're not familiar with Matt Leacock, he has 4 games in Board Game Geek's top 100. He has, and it's interesting because you'll see a theme. There's Pandemic Legacy Season 1, Pandemic Legacy Season 2, Pandemic, and Pandemic Iberia are all the top 100. Matt Leacock, obviously very, very well known for his Pandemic games. However, he has another series of games that is getting their next installment, and that is the Forbidden games. So Forbidden Desert, Forbidden Island, and what is finally coming out, the much anticipated Forbidden Sky, will be released at Gen Con this year. It is a cooperative game. If you're not familiar with the Forbidden series, basically you have to work as a team to explore an area. Typically you have to either recover parts of something to put together an item that is going to allow you to be rescued from this ever changing, ever sinking, if it's the island, ever filling with sand, if it's the desert, space. So it's a really interesting concept. And like I said, it's a cooperative game. I think the thing that's really nice about it is it works well for younger kids as well. It's not necessarily as serious as like the Pandemic games are, but really looking forward to seeing the return of those Forbidden games. Like I said, Forbidden Island is good. Forbidden Desert, I would say, is great. and I'm really interested to see what he does with Forbidden Sky. The only thing I hope, and I could probably be wrong about it, and I think some people disagree with me, I really hope this game is in a box and not in a tin. I really don't like tins.
It is in a box.
It is in a box?
Yeah.
Yes! Then I'm excited even more about it. So that is another game I would definitely be checking out. That is Forbidden Sky. What's else on your list, sir?
Well, Forbidden Sky was also on my list, so we're matching up pretty good.
Nice.
Lost Cities Rivals is on my list. So if anyone's familiar with Lost Cities, 2-player game might come up later in the questions portion of the show. Lost Cities Rivals will actually be 2 to 4 players. And I'm gonna read their description. It's a Cosmos game. It's a Knizia game. I'm gonna read you what they say is the difference between the two, because they're pretty similar. So the primary difference in this title compared to others is that you must win auctions in order to place your cards in the expeditions. So in the first game, you're drawing numbered colored cards and trying to place them in descending order. And you're essentially taking cards from your opponent, and it was strictly 2 players. So if you had the blue 5, you might be the only person to get that. And you can skip numbers in the game, but you lose points if you don't go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You could go 1, 5, 7, and that could be it. And you'd only get a certain amount of points. So they're adding an auction style to this game. The card deck still consists of 5 colors, but it also adds 3 wager cards. And basically you're dividing into 4 piles, going through your turns, and you raise or pass on the cards. So it looks like they're taking the Seven Wonders Duel aspect of that game and making their own version of their game, which makes it more competitive. So it takes a light competitive game that you can kind of have fun with, and sounds like it's going to be a little bit more serious and potentially fun, hopefully. We'll see.
Very cool. So my next game is a game that I honestly don't know that much about, and this is definitely a game I would want to probably get a demo of before I bought. But the theme of the game I find so fascinating, and that is a game called Symphony Number 9. Now, this game is a betting, wagering, set collection game. So you are basically betting on or bidding on the works of artists to gain their ownership. So you are a patron of Symphony Number 9. You're a patron in the 18th century, basically trying to woo all of these musicians with money to own their works. And I think I'm not necessarily a huge set collection / betting game person, but I am really interested in the theme of this game, because there's not very many games that are thematic regarding music. Yeah. We get a lot of games in a lot of other areas, but not a lot of music games. And like I said, clearly this game I don't think is going to be really focusing on the musical aspect, but I think using music as the setting for this set collection betting game, I find to be very fascinating. I will say I don't know much about this company or these designers. They are, I think, pretty new to the US. I don't think they've done a lot of releases here. But I am definitely interested to see how this game goes over. I'm going to be following it very closely to see what the feedback is, how the demos go, and to check out some early reviews from this game once people get it in their hands, because it will be for sale at Gen Con. So that's just something I'm definitely keeping an eye on, and that is Symphony Number 9. How many more games do you have on your list, sir? Do you got a ton more? What are we sitting at?
I can scrap stuff, no problem. I have way more than I needed just in case.
I'm in the same boat. So how about you just go quickly through the games that are remaining on your list and just tell me why you're interested in them in a very brief fashion.
Great idea. All right, so the Sagrada 5 and 6 player expansion is on my list. I don't really have to go in too much into it. It includes 2 more boards. It includes a dice tray, and it includes new pieces to basically just make the game look better. So when you roll a die, instead of just having them in the middle of the table, it has like a stained glass circle, and they fit inside the circle, and you can draft them from that. So we've been waiting for it for a while. We can't wait to get our hands on it. Speaking of expansions, Onitama Way of the Wind is a game I'm looking forward to getting the expansion for. It actually adds a wind piece to the board that you can't intentionally like go onto the space, but it can push you off the board or move you around. So I'm interested to see how that mechanic works. I want to see some people get some playtime in it. Speaking of games that we don't know much about, 8-Bit Box from Yellow will be there, which is something they teased at Dice Tower Con, I want to say. Maybe Essen or something earlier than that. I have no idea what it is. I just want to see what exactly it is. Oh, they teased it at E3. That's right. So it has some like gaming mix into it. I've hit this fly like 7 times while we've been recording, and it's still circling me.
It is just so
very
committed.
Aggressive. It was very aggressive. Aliens, Another Glorious Day in the Core. It's an Aliens miniatures game. It might be the game that gets me into miniatures. I'm such a big fan of that universe. I'm just looking forward to finding out more about it. There's not a lot of details out for the game. I'll skip right over Gloomhaven Forgotten Circles, the expansion for Gloomhaven. There's a game called Hand of Fate for the consoles and PC. Hand of Fate and Hand of Fate 2. I was a huge fan of Hand of Fate, a game based on tarot cards, almost like a choose-your-own-adventure D&D style game. They have a board game mode called Hand of Fate Ordeals, which can be played 2 to 4 players or solo. So I'm looking forward to seeing more details about that. And last, Kick-Ass, the board game.
Oh.
And I'm a real big fan of the first movie. I liked the second movie. The comics are great. So I'm excited to see what they do with it because it's from CMON. So we're not looking at kind of like just another licensed game by some company. It's going to be done right. So I'm just kind of excited to see more about the game. The board looks nice and big. The character sheets look great. So I'm just excited to check the game out and see, it's 1 to 4 players. So I'm pretty excited about that too. And they got John Romita Jr., who does the art for the comic, to do the art for the board game. So
awesome.
That's the rest of my list. You're going to mention some of the other ones that are on my list.
Oh, okay, cool. So I just have a couple others I'm going to go through really quickly. One of them is being the game Root or Root, depending on where you live in the country. It is the follow-up game from Leader Games, who they produced, or I should say they published Vasta Crystal Caverns. This is the next game that company is doing. It is a different designer, I believe, but it looks really interesting. It is an area control game, and it is focused with animals in a fantasy setting, which I'm immediately in. Anytime you have animals trying to control parts of the forest, I am totally in. But Vast, I think, was a big surprise hit, so I'm really interested to see how Root is. And early reviews for it are very, very good. So definitely looking to check that out. It also seems like it's going to be a pretty heavy, meaty game from what the reviews are saying, so I'm definitely interested in that. The next one is a game from Renegade Game Studios, and that's Kimono. It is a re-implementation of the game Heartland. Heartland is, I think, you get pretty mixed reviews on what the game is. It is another area control game, but it has Heartland. It was a pretty not exciting theme because you were a farmer, basically. And I'm really interested to see if a re-implementation or reskinning of that game is going to kind of reawaken or improve people's perceptions of what that game is. And I'm always interested when they very similarly re-implement a game with a very different theme to see if that changes folks' perceptions of it. And that's one of the reasons I'm interested in Kimono. The last two then are both from the good folks over at Plaid Hat. One of them is Guardians, which Colin had talked about. It currently sounds like they're going to have less than 200 copies on sale at Gen Con is what the current number is sitting at. It looks like, according to Board Game Geek. So if you are interested in the Guardians, you'll have to get there very early. So definitely looking forward to that. And then the newest game that they announced this last Monday, Commonauts, which is another game from Jerry Hawthorne, the same person who did Mice and Mystics, the same person who did Stuffed Fables. He is coming out with another adventure book game. Again, it's called Commonauts. This will be at Gen Con, but it will not be available for purchase there, but you can pre-order it on their site right now. But it is basically, I feel like as if you took Stuffed Fables and made it into a more sci-fi adult story. that's kind of what they're trying to do with this, but still using that adventure book as the board. So really excited to see how that goes. So those were the few other games that I had on my list.
I killed the fly.
Nice work. Congratulations. That might be the best moment in the podcast we have had thus far, period, in podcasting history. So
I wish we could re-record so I would be more focused.
No, it's okay. You're great. No problems at all. One really quick side note before we move on to listener questions, and I know we're getting a little long, so I want to keep us moving a little piffy here. The Spiel des Jahres winners were announced, and I thought it was really important that we just talk about those very briefly. Back in May, they announced the nominees for them, and just over a couple days ago, they announced the actual winners. The winner of the Spiel des Jahres was Azul, so no, I don't think a huge surprise there. Azul has been definitely a hot game for people, so that is the one that won the Spiel. Oh boy, the Kennerspiel was won. Oh boy, the Kennerspiel was won by Die Quacksalberg von Quedlinburg.
That sounds good.
Yeah, Die Quacksalber von Quedlinburg, I believe is how you say it. So again, I don't think that game is out in the United States yet. I'm sure it will be, especially now that it won the Kennerspiel. And then, of course, the Kinderspiel won by Dragon's Breath, or as Josh likes to say, Funkelschatz. So those are the winners of the Spiel this year. Again, Azul, the Quacksalber von Quedlinburg, and Funkelschatz taking home the prizes. Big congratulations to all of them. If those games are not on your short list, they definitely should be now. Hey, Josh, it looks like we got a question.
We did get a question. I just wanted to say, I'm really excited for Comonauts. I think it looks pretty cool.
I agree. Oh, no, absolutely. When they released that kind of general, like, little teaser about it and all that good stuff, it looks interesting. Like, I really enjoyed the post, reading through it. It looks cool.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Okay, yeah, so Splig, super listener Splig, sends a question, and Splig says, games compact and that travel well, question mark? I don't have to read where he's going, right? He wants to grab an exit. He might grab an exit game to play on his vacation. And he doesn't have to worry about bringing it back. I think that's pretty funny. You can leave it for the next guests. So I don't know about Kyle, but I'm literally just going to look to my right, and I can tell you I have all my portable small games right next to me. Games that are perfect for travel. We got Welcome to the Dungeon, Flip City, the Exit games, Seven Wonders Duel, Fox in the Forest, Super Hot, Kodama, Citadel is the card game, Pyramids, and so many more. Some of them got out of my eyesight. I don't want to keep rattling off games. But the Unlock games are pretty big, and Custom Heroes is in that list too. That's a good trick-taking game as well. It's a little bit different than Fox in the Forest and for more than 2 players. Those are all great games. You can literally walk into I know when you walk into an FLGS, like there's so many, it can be hard to figure out what to grab. And I know Splig has kids, so I was trying to think of a good small portable game for families. And I don't know if Kyle has one, but I can find something while Kyle gives his list.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because I think it depends definitely how many people you're trying to play with. And obviously, for me, most of my small travel games are 2-player because they're things that just the wife and I play whenever we go on trips. So the things that I go to right away, and these aren't necessarily 2-player games, but Okie Dokie, I think, is still a great option for that. I think it's inexpensive, easy to teach, and fun for just about anyone. So that's going to be a good pick. I still really enjoy going to Red 7. I really enjoy Red 7s. I think that is a great game as well. And there's another one that is supposed to be Flip It. That's already at the top of my head. I just cannot remember what the heck it is. But there's Hanabi. Hanabi, I think, is a great game to travel as well. Travels really easily, and it does great things. So yeah, those are some. And then I think if you're looking for a 2-player one, Jaipur is obviously a great game as well. The Hive might be a good fit as well, or even the game, depending on what you're looking for. I tend to go to compact card games because then you don't even necessarily need the box if you don't want to. So
yeah, Ticket to Ride New York would be a good one also.
So hopefully one of those games is going to work for you, Splig. Thanks for writing in for questions. You always can hit us up at Board with VG on Twitter for any questions that you have or anything you want us to talk about. Hey, Josh, we've been going for quite a while here. What do you say we wrap the show up?
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Remember, you can find us on social media at Board with VG. Use that hashtag, please. We're also at facebook.com/boardwithvg, and of course, boardwithvg@gmail.com. In lieu of plugs, I will just say, Paul, you will be getting Magic Maze, but everyone's sold out right now. I don't know, maybe they won some award or something recently. But you will be getting it. Hold tight. I know you're doing some work right now, so you might not even have time to play the games for a little bit, but I'm going to get that out to you just as soon as I possibly can. So that's all for me. Kyle, where can they find you?
Yeah, people could find me at all the usual places: Twitter, Instagram, PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, and Board Game Geek, all at Psychocross, CYCOCROSS. If you have any suggestions for future things we should talk about or cover, be sure to reach out to us. One thing I know we've done on occasion is we have played the same board game or played the same video game and maybe gone a little more in depth on that. If that's something you like, let us know. It just takes a little more scheduling on our part, which is fine, but it's not something that happens naturally very often. So that if that is something you enjoy where we just focus on like one or two games and I play the same thing, let us know, because we can definitely do that. But that's something we've been kicking around in our heads a little bit. But again, like I said, if you have any other topics, suggestions, let us know. Reach out to us on the social medias. We really appreciate you listening, everyone. And if you are willing or want to, go check out the Make Us Better Patreon at patreon.com/makeusbetter. And with that, remember, everyone, whether it be board games or video games, never stop gaming.
This has been a production of the Play Some Video Games Podcast Network. Find more great content at playsomevideogames.com.